We just want to keep the tradition consistent. So we
Alrighty.
are recording Script Sundays TV Season 1 Speaker Series. I'd like to welcome you guys, and we now have Ted E.D., our senior head writer, who's going to be speaking on stand-up comedy. So, Ted, whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, when I was a young lad,
where were you born?
when I was actually a little kid, I had a lot of trouble making friends, and so I'd watch quite a bit of TV. And one of my favorite things was stand-up. And one of my favorite comics was Robin Williams. You know, he was a super likable dude, very funny. Mm-hmm. Even when I was a young kid and didn't necessarily understand what he was talking about, he still always made me laugh. And I noticed that people really liked him. So at first I was the annoying kid with the knock-knock joke book that everyone dreaded. Mm-hmm. But then I started paying more attention, started studying comedy in a way on my own time. Like I'd study how a comedian said a joke, or how they worded it, what they said, what they didn't say, and then how the crowd reacted, so I just started learning that way. And then funny enough, my local community college does this thing called continuing education, and it was and there's little seminars and classes you can take during the summer. You get little certificates and there was a stand-up comedy class, and I was kind of a cocky jerk I was like, oh, a stand-up comedy class. Well, I guess I'll check it out. And it was $100, and I actually had a little extra income at the time. So I was like, well, I'll check it out. And I learned a lot, actually. I learned a little more because you had people to give you feedback on your performance. Mm-hmm. And so I learned, I feel like it really improved my game. And so our final was, we got to actually perform at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle here in nice. Roseville, in not Roseville, Royal Oak. And that was the final. And I, not to toot my own horn, but I did really well. Everybody laughed when I did my set, and I was like, man, I love doing this, so I want to do more of this. And so I've been do it on and off, very little since quarantine, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So how many years then?
How many years? Oh my Lord. I mean, I want to say 13. I think about 13. I did it in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. At least. I'm 37 now, so I would at least say 13. I mean 10 years old, but I mean, I didn't get as much positive feedback in those days. But that was mostly my story. And so I've just been, and again, I'm a giant nerd, so when I get obsessed with something, I research it. So I became a comediologist. So
you said a what to me?
I call it comediologist because I love to study comedy. Just see every little. I analyze it. Mm-hmm. I'm some kind of scientist. But I study dick and fart jokes. So, and so that's what I do. I just love it because I do have a bit of an ego, and it's me getting on a stage and talking about myself. So, it's just an awesome time.
It's a liberating feeling, Ted.
It is.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Because it's just you.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful part about it.
Yeah.
It's
not a whole lot of prep to do, so
yeah.
You just get up and it's just a nice one-sided conversation.
Yeah.
So
my question to you is,
yes.
How do you normally go about preparing your material? Do you tend to sort of script a lot of it out before you go up on stage, or do you kind of have a general idea of certain punchlines you want to make sure that you're throwing in there, but trying to ease into it with the audience while trying to add as much naturalistic humor as you can.
Oh no, I try to, and this is how I do it. Like it's always, your comedy depends on you, so mileage may vary. I generally kind of write footnotes, you know, like things I want to talk about, like cats versus dogs, and then I remember all my jokes for cats and dogs. But yeah, I make little footnotes because like I'm too, if I write my jokes out, I'm tempted to read them off like I'm doing a book report, you know. So, and I don't think anybody wants to watch that, you know. I think they want me to bring my personality, you know, and tell the joke like I'm actually speaking to them, if that makes sense. But generally, yeah, I make like a quick footnote, and then, you know, I pretend I'm having a conversation with a group of people, because I generally am. So that's how I prepare. I have a little composition book. I call them the cow books because they have that design. You know, you've seen those, right?
Yeah, of course.
Wait,
College
a
rule,
book?
man.
I don't know what that is. What's a cow book?
A cow book. It's the composition here, because it's got the.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, it's yeah.
Yeah,
Sam knows
no,
what
I
I'm talking
feel you.
about. I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
trust me,
Quite a few of those.
I got a flurry of those sitting in my apartment, man.
Yeah, I've been collecting them for years.
I've seen a few in my middle school days.
Yeah. But yeah, I call them cow books because they look like a cow.
Yeah.
But that's how I prepare. It's just, and again, I come from a bit of an improv background, so I kind of like a bit of nerves, as crazy as that sounds, when I get on stage, because it makes me focus. I read the room better. So, but that's how I prepare.
Now, for me, because I'm a very high energy comedian. At least I like to think I am.
Yeah.
And one of the things I tend to do is that I try and like really get myself in the mental zone to kind of hype myself up. Like I'll lean into like the energy that I'm feeling from the nerves, but I'll try and make sure that I hype myself in the process. Do you do the same or anything like that?
To a degree. Like I like to listen to like cheesy 80s metal ballads.
Yeah.
You know, just to get me hyped up a little bit. But naturally, no, mostly just songs from Transformers 80s cartoon. That movie.
Nice.
That's that.
Nice.
I'm dating myself basically, but yeah. But you know, it's just like cheesy 80s inspirational music, I guess. You know, like they had that like that synth and that like guitar lick that, you know, it really gets me pumped. But I'm actually a very low energy comedian. So I just kind of go up there with I'm gonna tell some jokes, whatever kind of attitude.
I'm here barely. Hey.
Yeah, I'm here.
Look at it.
And I feel like I do better when I'm just like, you know, a little more. Well, I mean, like I said, I do like to have a bit of nerves, as crazy as it sounds, just because it keeps me focused. Because every time I go on stage and I'm like cocky, you know, I'm like, I'm gonna make everybody laugh. Those are my worst shows. So, you know, I know it's a bit controversial, but I don't like to go up there with confidence because it burns me. Your mileage may vary, but
well, honestly, I found that there's a very fine line that you got to tout between confidence and delusion. You know, like you should have some level of faith within your jokes, but it's okay to have that doubt because humor is in fact subjective, especially with the stand-up environment. You don't know how the crowd's going to react. They could be terrible. They could be great. But I think to kind of go in there and just immediately expect that you're like, my jokes are always going to hit. I'm a genius. I'm brilliant about this. You're going to fail because your illusion's going to get smashed, or you're going to be so blind that you're not going to be able to grow as a comic. Yeah,
and it's going to hurt more when you bomb. So definitely. And speaking of bombing, for anybody listening who's just getting into comedy, I have good and bad news. The good news is you may never bomb. You might just do a great show every time. the bad news, I lied about the good news. Yeah. It sounds horrible, but like, you're going to bomb. It's going to happen at some point, and you just got to make your peace with it now. Everybody, there's always going to be somebody who does not like your material, whether it's just kind of, you know, they just don't like your face, they don't get where you're coming from. It's 1,000 factors that you have no control over. So appreciate the laughs you get, and just know that there's no such thing as a perfect crowd. So and you're going to have bad nights, and if you still want to do this, then you belong after those nights, because they can be brutal. So bit of advice I can give you, you know, is just like, you gotta have a tough skin to do this. And if you don't, I strongly recommend that you don't, you know, like do flower arranging or something, do anything else.
Underwater basket weaving.
Huh?
Underwater basket weaving.
I still miss that.
Underwater basket weaving.
Oh yeah, there you go. I hear it's relaxing. I don't know.
Not said. Another question I got for you here is, obviously you're gonna bomb. That's the nature of stand-up. It's going to happen. Like, it not like a good, especially when starting out. Like 9 times out of 10, you're gonna tank.
Yeah.
But my question though is, I know many people who try and make certain bits work. And these bits don't land, and they rewrite it and they re-improve it, and they try their best to rewrite it to the best of their ability. But do you feel like there ever is a moment where you just got to give up on a bit and move on to something else and try something new?
Yes, absolutely.
And when do you think that is?
It's just, usually in comedy, there's the rule of 3. So if I say, if you've tried the same bit like during like 3 shows, and everyone's just like, okay, whatever. I'd be like, maybe this needs to go. You know, that's what I would advise. You know, like rule of 3. You know, 3 strikes, it's out. That's how I feel. So, you know, just like, don't try to save a bad bit. And if anything, maybe you can use, like, making fun of the bit itself. Like, that's something I do. When I feel a joke isn't working, I will make fun of that joke. You know, so I will make bombing work to my favor, if that makes sense.
All right.
No, because another key component about stand-up is that if you are bombing, embrace it. Don't run from it. Don't try and save yourself by trying to think of new, funnier jokes on the spot. Just recognize the situation. When you recognize that, you're gonna succeed a lot more, I think.
Yeah. And it's like, I feel it gets the crowd to empathize with you, and that gets a bit of a laugh. I mean, probably a pity laugh, but a laugh is a laugh. So I'll take it, whatever. But yeah, I would just say, like, don't get married to a bit, because it's gonna, and sometimes, like, it could be funny when you first started doing the bit, but then, you know, over time, you know, some of your stuff's going to have an expiration date, and there's just going to be a day when you just got to let it go. And it's sad because, you know, sometimes it's a bit that you're like, oh man, I really worked hard on this joke. And if people don't like it, they don't like it. You're not going to make them like it by just forcing it on them. So sometimes you got to kill your darlings. I mean, that's in any creative avenue you take. You know, if you're a writer, sometimes you got to kill those characters that you love making. You know,
Yeah.
So that is, but I mean, just like I said, you know, you're going to bomb. It's going to happen. So just be prepared.
Yeah. And on the subject of kind of killing your bits, how often should a stand-up starting out be trying to test out new material, new ideas? Because how often should a person be trying to work on stuff versus doing the stuff that quote unquote works? Because I know there's a lot of comics out there, and I see it a lot here in Los Angeles, where There's certain comics who are always trying new stuff back and forth every single day. I try and do that myself to try and like keep the gears turning, to keep writing and rewriting and rewriting. But I also know other comedians who I've seen them go on stage and do the same 5-10 minutes at literally everywhere they go, be it an open mic, be it a big show at the Comedy Store, be it a bringer show in some like small little cafe on Hollywood Boulevard. Like,
right.
I see it. And where exactly is that cutoff between should you be always trying to innovate more and working harder, or should you just keep doing the stuff that works? And when should you stop doing the stuff that works? Do you feel like you're kind of stunning your growth if you keep just doing that stuff?
No, I mean,
feel like there's okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
sorry, go ahead.
That is a good question. It's a tough call, to be honest. Like, I always feel like you should always be innovating because, you know, you never know how the crowd's going to react unless you're an omnipotent being. You know, you don't know what the future holds. But if you have bits that work, like I'd say slowly start. If you have a whole act that works, it's not necessarily bad to keep doing it. But I would say start slowly introducing new jokes in there. You know, like I think that's. I mean, I know it's not stand-up comedy, but when Metallica tried that new album, One, I think they went completely in a different direction, and everyone was like, "What are you doing?" So it's like there's something called setting a precedent. Like if you're just like let's say you're a shock comic. The weakness of being a shock comic is everybody expects that you're going to try and say some shocking stuff. But the whole point of being a shock comic is nobody knows what you're going to say. So you get trapped in that paradox. But it's just, it depends on the precedent you set. It's just like, hey, I do this, like Ron White. I think Ron White does the same act his whole career. You know, like I've heard his joke. I can't distinguish between his specials, to be honest.
I think I heard some of his early mid-2000s stuff. And I think it's kind of that. I think one of his recurring jokes is a good joke, but I think if you hear it 10 times, it's kind of the one like, one time I got asked to leave the bar,
right?
And I wasn't told I had to leave or I had to wave goodbye to everybody, but I got thrown out of the bar, and he
yeah, exactly. And so it's just like always be innovating, but you know, don't drop something that works just because you're tired of it, you know. And like your crowd has its favorites. And it's good to start with what they know, what they're familiar with. But, you know, always be innovating, you know, just kind of slip it in there, you know, just gradually add it into the act. That's, I think, is the best way, because to completely change your act every time is just, it confuses people. You know,
so like a hybrid approach. Hybrid approach.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you know, and so sometimes like even if people start, it's like, I've heard this joke before. Again, you can make fun of that fact. It's just like, well, I don't have anything new, so deal with it. You know, or you know, just make a joke out of you having the same jokes all the time. So I think, like I said, always be innovating, because you know there's new worlds to explore. I'll put it that way.
Now, you mentioned something about shock comics,
yes.
And this is actually a huge issue I can have with comedians that are starting out that consider themselves shock comics, where they tell you, "I'm not going for a laugh, I'm going for a reaction," and I never really understood that philosophy. As a comedyologist, maybe you could kind of help understand that sort of mentality. Do you think that's the right approach a comedian should go, a shock comic, quote unquote, should go for? Or do you feel like that's kind of stunning their ability to move forward as a comedian? Because a comedian's looking to get laughter, not gasps, you know?
Right. I mean, it depends on who you are. I think that's the first thing, because if you're someone who likes attention, whether it's good or bad, then that's probably going to work for you. But my only thing about shock comedy, and listen, I have a very blue, dark humor. But I think wit is always going to work best. Okay. Like, for instance, the weakness of shock comedy is when people know you as a shock comedian, they're going to expect you to shock them. But the paradox of that is, well, shock is you did something they didn't expect. So now they're expecting you to do something they don't expect. And now you're trapped in this weird time loop, if that, you know.
To a corner.
What?
It's like you painted yourself into a corner.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just kind of, and plus, you know, again, this is not necessarily being prudish. Sometimes it's just like, it's kind of a spectrum thing, you know, like if you're a clean comedian, you can be a little too clean, you know, and then your jokes just come off cheesy and, you know, they're cringy because of how sweet they are. But at the other end of the spectrum is being shocking just for the sake of being shocking. You know, it's just like, for instance, Daniel Tosh, he tells like a lot of like, he does a bit of edgy jokes, but he's clever in the way he words those jokes. He's not saying it just to piss people off. He's making a point. So
I feel like Jesselnick kind of does that same thing with his material. Exactly. I think he's a very good guy because a lot of his stuff is very well written. It shocks, but it's also brilliant. Like you can tell, like he spent time in the lab crafting that stuff out.
Exactly. So it's like, it's okay to be shocking, but I'd say make a point if you're going to do that shock value stuff.
Don't go on stage and just yell the N-word or something like that.
Exactly. You know, don't be like, hey, I had sex with my grandma the other day. Mm-hmm. And then I had sex with my grandpa. And, you know, it's just like, okay, you have sex with your family. We get it. You know.
And honestly, I think that's actually, and this is actually another question I want to ask you here, Ted. Sorry, I'm like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you, this conversation.
I like it.
You're fine. That's what it's for.
Okay. I feel like I'm noticing, I see this a lot at the LA open mic level, where you'll see a lot of people talking about like, oh yeah, I banged this chick, or oh my God, I was smoking all this weed, or oh my God, white people are different from black people, like all this sort of stuff.
Right.
And I'm seeing a lot of my question to you is, I feel like some of that material can maybe premises and topics can be considered hack or something like that, right? And my question for you is, what do you think is hack material?
Hack,
if there is any.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the shock comedy thing. Like, I think like I'm a big believer in like it's either all okay or none of it's okay in the way of speech. But hack can be like, you know, if it's just like, if you're just going up as like black people and white people are different. No duh, you know?
Yeah.
But it's more of just like, again, you have to word it clever. You got to be clever. Like I said, wit is always going to sell a joke. Wit you can't see me. I don't know why I'm using my hands.
Oh, no. I can see you now.
Oh, okay. But wit is always the pinnacle of humor, I would say. So if you can make a point, if you can word it the right way, in a way that's clever, then then it's not hack. But hack is just kind of going for, you know, everyone can see the punchline after the fifth word you said. You know, it's just kind of like, those white people sure can't dance. It's like, we've heard that one.
Yeah, that's 80s, 90s, really.
Exactly. So it's just like, okay, you know.
Horse. Beat a dead horse with that.
Exactly. So, and again, that's going back to, you know, some bits have an expiration date, you know. So,
and
go ahead.
Sorry, and Hayward, you mentioned actually another interesting point, where you said that those kind of subjects and talking points are very 80s and 90s. Do you feel like, what do you feel like modern stand-up has kind of taken on today, in terms of that ideology or approach, or like, do you feel like there's been kind of a interesting dynamic change since the like 80s era versus today?
Are you asking me that?
Well, I was asking that to Ted, but
Oh, okay.
Hayward, you feel free to chime in.
No, Ted, it's all you.
All right. I don't know. I mean, like, it's been kind of like, because I still love, like, I can still sit down and watch Eddie Murphy's Raw and enjoy the hell out of it. I still think it's funny. With today's comedy, like, I think not to get political or, you know, be an ageist or anything, you know. I don't know. I think it's like today's comedy is too safe. It's not willing to take any risks, you know, because like it's rare that I see a modern comedian that I like, to be honest. But I think it's just kind of our environment right now where it's just like, you know, it's with cancel culture, it's just hard to go for those. It's hard to go for what you really want to say.
Do you feel like there are any modern comics today that still try and make sure that they're still trying to cross that line and make a point and not do anything in fear of cancel culture or anything like that?
Your thoughts on Bill Burr? Bill Burr seems to be
Bill Burr
good at towing that line.
Exactly.
I mean,
Bill Burr is very good.
He challenges the cancel culture. He paints a pretty good commentary on it.
Yeah.
Because he isn't just so extreme, like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
You know, I don't know.
I think, like, I do like Bill Burr. I would have to say Bill Burr. Although I wouldn't call him modern, because he's been around for.
Yeah, he's been around since the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to call him a modern comedian. I mean, he still does comedy, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I first, like many people, I first saw him on Chappelle's show. Rachel
exactly. I loved him on Chappelle's
Rachel
show.
Draft.
I miss Chappelle's show.
2004. But I know he was around way before that, you know.
But I mean, are like there any like I don't know, younger comics today, or like comics that kind of have come up in the past 4 or 5 years that you see that have that societal challenging perspective?
Well, there's a guy I know personally, like no one knows of him yet, which I think is a damn shame. But there's a friend of mine named I hope he doesn't mind me dropping his name, Noah Chap. And he does like a lot of, like, he's a very awkward dude, but he leans into it. And he tells like a lot of awkward jokes, like a lot of awkward one-liners. Like they say men are attracted to women who remind them of their mothers, which is probably why I'm a necrophile. You know, like that's one of his jokes. And I'm like, holy shit. But I'd recommend my friend Noah Chap, but he's so far one of the people that really impresses me, because with how clever he is, but his jokes are pretty edgy.
Yeah, like they cover that. It's hard to sell them on like a late night talk show like Kimmel or Conan.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, because they're just a little too blue. Yeah,
exactly. Because you gotta, because the censors are brutal these days.
Yes.
So
unfortunately.
So it's,
I don't know. Did you see that one Fallon bit where Dice Clay was on and he just completely tanked because he just couldn't say any of the stuff that he wanted to?
I did not. I haven't watched. I don't watch TV nowadays. Like, that's not me being pretentious or anything. It's just I don't have the time, and I don't care. You know. You know, and it's just I've never been a Jimmy Fallon fan, to be honest. So.
Yeah. It might not have been Fallon. It might have been Kimmel or something like that.
Maybe.
I just found it insane, really, to see like Dice Clay have to work clean or work as like insanely clean as he did on that clip, because it did not showcase his comedic talents at all, or the hack has been mentality that Kinnison so adamantly fought against.
Yeah. Actually, fun fact: Andrew Dice Clay and Kinnison hated each other.
That's part of the reason why I brought it up.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I mean, Andrew Dice Clay is kind of an example of, you know, sometimes you have to try new shit.
Mhm.
You know, but yeah, it's tough. Like I said, it's like right now it's a tough time for comedy. I don't want to start some debate right now. I'm just trying to tell people about stand up, but like right now it's
Mhm.
I feel it's a very tough time for comedy, and it's just really hard, you know, to you don't want to offend people, but you still want to make people laugh. So
You got to tough
Yeah.
line. It's very
yeah,
tricky territory.
Mhm.
it
Well, I
is.
appreciate it. We do have to wrap up in a couple minutes if you want to
Oh,
say any final thoughts, because these last few Script Sundays meetings, we're still having the improv Sundays. So I pretty much open up the Zoom an hour before and after the meeting. So any comedians or actors want to come in and like do improv and practice on characters or impressions. So we got that coming up in like 9 minutes. So is there anything you want to kind of wrap up with, Ted? As we
I just, hey, if you want to do stand up, I would say, if you want to do anything in entertainment, I'd say try stand up first, even if it's not the route you want to go,
Mhm.
because if you can handle a stand up crowd, you can handle anything. So that's my,
That is very great advice.
yes. And you don't even have to go do stand up and be good. Like, again, like this is not a path that a lot of people want to go down. I'm just recommending it because it just prepares you for how brutal entertainment can be.
Mhm.
And I'd say like a stand-up crowd is the meanest crowd you're going to encounter. So if you can handle them, you can handle anybody. That's how I feel. So that's my final thoughts. So, give stuff a try.
Well put. Well put. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate that.
Oh,
S2TV Speaker Series on stand-up comedy. So we're gonna upload this in the Google Drive folder. As you guys know, there should be you all should have access to it, so you can see all past speaker series. So good job, Ted. Great commentary. Appreciate you.